I genuinely thought my connection to my ex ended the day she packed her things, blocked my number, and somehow turned a 3-year relationship into something that felt like a bad memory wrapped in silence. So imagine my confusion when, almost 8 months later, I got a random call from her mom asking if I could help with the small roofing issue at her house. And here's the thing, before my breakup, I worked construction, specialized in roofing repairs, and her family knew it. At first, I figured maybe she was desperate, maybe money was tight, maybe she trusted me because I'd helped around the house before. But then she casually said, "Finish it, and I'll make it worth your while," with this strange confidence that instantly made my stomach twist. Bro, something about that sentence felt off immediately. What I didn't know yet was that saying yes would drag me straight into entitlement, manipulation, betrayal, and one of the wildest lessons of my life. 8 months after the breakup, I was finally getting my life back together. Not perfectly, not in some movie montage kind of way where everything suddenly becomes inspiring background music and confidence, but enough that I could breathe again. I had steady work, a few loyal clients, and most importantly, distance from the emotional tornado my breakup had become. My ex, Emily, hadn't just ended things, she detonated them. One week we were talking about apartment upgrades and long-term plans. The next week she suddenly decided she needed freedom and vanished into this cold version of herself I barely recognized. Her family stopped talking to me overnight too, which honestly hurt almost as much because I had spent holidays at their place, fixed their kitchen cabinets, helped her dad move furniture, even climbed onto their roof more times than I could count after storms. That family used to call me basically one of us, which hearing that now feels almost comedic in hindsight. Bro, if life teaches you anything, it's that people love calling you family right up until it becomes inconvenient. So when her mom's number popped up on my phone one rainy Thursday afternoon, I actually stared at it for a second, thinking my screen had glitched. I almost didn't answer. Curiosity won. That's probably mistake number one in stories like this. Her tone immediately threw me off because she sounded warm. Too warm. Like the kind of overly pleasant voice someone uses when they want something. She started by asking how I'd been, and talking about how hard the breakup had been for everyone. Which already made me internally laugh because suddenly everybody cared after disappearing for months. Then she pivoted smoothly. Too smoothly. 3, apparently, the back section of her roof had started leaking after bad weather. A contractor had quoted her an outrageous price, and she immediately thought of me because, in her words, "You always did amazing work." Hearing praise from someone who ghosted me by association should have been my warning sign, but I'll admit something embarrassing here. I still cared what that family thought of me. That's exactly how people get emotionally manipulated in real life. Not through dramatic villain speeches, just little bits of validation wrapped around convenience. I asked why she didn't call an actual company, and she sighed dramatically, saying money was tighter than expected and repairs needed to happen fast before interior damage spread. Then came the sentence that hooked me: "To finish it, and I'll make it worth your while." Now look, construction people hear stuff like this all the time. Sometimes it means fair pay, sometimes it means cash plus dinner, sometimes it means somebody thinks exposure and gratitude count as currency. But because this was my ex's mom, and because I'd known them forever, I assumed she meant something genuine. Maybe she needed help and couldn't afford market rates. Maybe she planned to pay after insurance cleared. Maybe this was just awkward timing. Against my better judgment, I agreed to stop by Saturday morning to inspect it. And this is where things started feeling weird almost immediately. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was my ex's car parked outside. My stomach dropped. Nobody mentioned Emily would be there. Nobody warned me. And suddenly, what was supposed to be a simple roofing favor started feeling like I had accidentally walked straight into something much messier than loose shingles and water damage. For the second I stepped out of my truck, every instinct in me started flashing warning signs. You know that weird feeling when something technically looks normal, but your gut quietly says, "Yeah, this is going to become a problem." That was me standing in the driveway staring at Emily's car while trying to convince myself I was overthinking it. Maybe she was just visiting. Maybe her mom forgot to mention she'd be around. Maybe this would stay awkward for 5 minutes and then settle into something tolerable. I genuinely wanted to believe that reality had other plans. Her mom greeted me at the door like absolutely nothing strange was happening, smiling, thanking me repeatedly, acting almost overly excited that I showed up. Meanwhile, Emily barely acknowledged me. No apology, no friendliness, not even basic politeness, just this cold, detached energy like I was some random worker she'd never spent years with. Bro, I'm not gonna lie, that messed with my head more than I expected. It's wild how somebody who once knew every detail about your life can suddenly act like you're furniture. 5. I had already hauled materials, replaced damaged sections, reinforced weak spots, and spent hours in brutal heat trying to stop leaks that clearly had been ignored for months. The job was bigger than anything originally described, and every time I mentioned costs or timelines, Emily's mom brushed it aside with this weird confidence, like details somehow didn't matter. You're doing great, she'd say. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. Looking back, those words should have set off alarms loud enough to shake the whole neighborhood. But what really pushed me over the edge was Emily. At first, it was little things, random comments, small jabs disguised as jokes, and then it escalated. One afternoon, while I was carrying supplies down a ladder, I overheard her laughing with her mom near the back patio. They weren't whispering, they weren't even trying to hide it. Apparently, I was still predictable. Apparently, they knew I helped because I always wanted approval. And then came the line that hit like a brick. Honestly, Emily joked, he probably still feels guilty about how things ended. Might as well get a roof out of it. Bro, hearing that genuinely stopped me in my tracks. This part was unbelievable because suddenly every confusing detail clicked into place. The fake kindness, the vague promises, the missing numbers whenever payment came up, the emotional setup. They never planned to treat this like professional work. They expected guilt, history, and manipulation to do the heavy lifting. So I made a decision. I wasn't walking off dramatically. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't giving them the satisfaction. Instead, I calmly finished only the structural weatherproofing necessary to prevent damage, documented every material cost, packed my equipment, and sent a professional invoice that evening. Clear labor, expenses, timeline, everything. And then I added one sentence at the bottom. Per our agreement, final completion resumes after payment confirmation. 6. The silence after that, immediate, and suddenly, the people who treated me like free labor had a very expensive unfinished problem sitting on top of their house. For 3 straight days, nobody replied. No angry texts, no fake apologies, nothing. Then out of nowhere, Emily's mom called sounding completely different from before. No sweetness, no warmth, just frustration wrapped in politeness. She claimed there had been a misunderstanding and said family shouldn't charge family like this. That sentence actually made me laugh because apparently I stopped being family the second Emily ended things, but somehow became family again when a damaged roof needed fixing. Funny how that works. I calmly reminded her I wasn't tired for a tiny patch job. I'd already invested labor and materials. And I paused only after realizing expectations weren't honest. By the end of the call, a payment magically became possible. Within a week, the invoice was settled, another contractor finished the rest, and for the first time since the breakup, I felt something unexpected. Closure. Not emotional closure from Emily, but the kind that comes from finally respecting your own boundaries. 7 bro, hearing this back still blows my mind because the biggest lesson wasn't even about revenge, it was about boundaries. People will sometimes remember your value only when they need something, then act shocked when kindness comes with limits. That's exactly how entitlement sneaks into real life, wrapped in nostalgia, fake appreciation, and promises that somehow never become specific. And honestly, the wildest part is how fast respect returned the second. Accountability showed up. I genuinely couldn't believe how differently things played out once emotions stopped running the situation and receipts started doing the talking. If this story had you shaking your head, drop a comment and tell me, would you have walked away immediately or handled it the same way? And if you want more unbelievable stories packed with karma, twists, betrayal, and comeback energy, make sure to stick around for the next one.